to help kick us off for our study today, I brought a collection of books that I wanted to just show you and ask you just a really simple question. So here I've got Men Are From Mars, Women Are From Venus, Good to Great, John Maxwell, Developing the Leader Within You. This one's good. Stephen Covey, 7 Habits of Highly Effective People. And then I've got Robert Kiyosaki's Rich Dad, Poor Dad. So first off, how many of you all have actually heard of at least one of these books, right? All right, most of you kind of have. And what would you classify these books as? What do all these books kind of have in common? Self-help. That's exactly right, and that's where they would be in the Barnes & Noble bookstore. They would be under the self-help section. And with a self-help book, what are you trying to do? Yeah, I know you're trying to help yourself. I get it. But what is it you're seeking after?
Trying to be a better person, more efficient, better in whatever which way this book takes me.
Okay, trying to improve yourself, make yourself better. Yes. Okay, yeah, try how you think, how other people think, motivation, that's good. That's where I want to start. And I'm so glad you used the W word there, wisdom. And so wisdom is where we're going to start. And that's why we're studying the wisdom literature, right? Proverbs, if you want to turn there really quickly, Proverbs chapter 4, verses 5 through 7, it's one of my favorite keystone passages. It's in the top 5, definitely for sure. And if you turn there, may I have a volunteer, please, to read Proverbs chapter 4, verses 5 through 7. And if you're going to read nice and loud.
Get wisdom, get insight. Do not forget and do not turn away from the words of my mouth. Do not forsake her, and she will keep you. Love her, and she will guard you. The beginning of wisdom is this: get wisdom, and whatever you get insight.
I love. So I'll read to you from the New King James Version, which is what I have projected up here. Verse 7, it says, "Wisdom is the principal thing, therefore get wisdom." But Alan, what did yours say for verse 7?
The beginning of wisdom is this: get wisdom.
I love that because it's almost kind of like one of those things like stating the obvious and then restating it again. The beginning of wisdom is, first of all, you got to get it. It doesn't do you any good to leave anything on the table. And from other proverbs that we can see, wisdom cries aloud in the streets like a woman. She's just saying, "Hey, I'm right here." Wisdom is personified as a woman, rather, in the Proverbs. So get wisdom. And then I want to look at and by the way, I brought my book of wisdom this is the one I had when I was 11 years old. This was given to me. And I love this copy. It's the only copy of the New King James I actually have, so that's why I had to bring it this morning. But I love the way that it personified wisdom here. Yes, Grayson.
I don't know the exact passage that you cited, but wisdom crying out. What I take comfort from that in, I don't think I said that right, but you know what I'm saying.
Yeah.
Is that God not only wants us to get wisdom and to seek it, but it's not
Oh, yeah. Yeah, absolutely. Mike? Right, right. So I'm juggling here all of these books that I have because if you look in the ESV at that passage, Proverbs, what's interesting is I love the way that so I like the way the New King James phrases part of it. I like the way the ESV phrases part of it. Verse, yeah, verse 7 says, whatever you get insight. You know, first of all, get wisdom, but then, and the New King James says, in all of your getting, get insight, get understanding. So it's really cool. And Grayson,
Does that mean that put it into practice? Like, don't just get it, but use it?
get it, use it, understand it. Why do you have it, right? All of these, some of these are business books, some of these are personal books, like Men Are From Mars, Women Are from Venus, is just, guys who are idiots who don't understand females, and this is how you understand them, right? But then Good to Great is all about business principles, right? But they don't do you any good if you don't put any of them into practice. Lauren? Right, right. You can't just be cranial or academic with everything that you put into your head if you don't use it. The passage I was referring to earlier, by the way, is Proverbs chapter 1, verse 20. Wisdom calls aloud outside. She raises her voice in the open square. She cries out in chief concourses. She's everywhere, and she is crying, listen to me, right? So that's what we're going to focus on. That's where we're starting off with get wisdom from the wisdom literature. Now, today we're going to start off with the book of, before I begin, for reference, for this class and the next 3 classes, subsequent classes after this, I'm going to be using a series of 3 different books. If you want to get some of them, that's totally fine. You'll be following along. You may be anticipating what I'm going to talk about. One of them, obviously, is the Bible. Everybody should have your own personal copy of the Bible, whether it's digital or a hard copy. I prefer hard copies because I can write in hard copies a lot better. By the way, that's how I found the passage in Proverbs, is because I've got it underlined and highlighted from 1999, I think. You need to have a Bible in order to this. You won't be successful unless you have one. Another book that I'm going to use is this book of Psalms, reading and studying the book of praises. This is a very academic book. There's a lot of really good information in this book. A lot I'm going to derive from this book. And then another one is C.S. Lewis, his reflections on the Psalms. And this is really cool because this is somebody who just has insight, and he thinks in a way that is just, it's really deep, but he's able to bring out a lot of things that I've certainly never thought of. So if you're interested, you can take a picture of that or whatever. Those are the books that I will be referencing, and they're really easy reads. I mean, that Reflections on the Psalms, I think, is a very, very small book. Not much to it as far as thickness, but it's got a lot of great insight, okay? So, Psalms. Let's talk about a little bit of the Psalms. Why read the Psalms? And that's an open question. I want to ask you, why read the Psalms?
I'm sure there's many answers to that. My answer, one of my answers, is that it gives us, again, the insight. There's our word of the day.
Yeah.
Besides wisdom. It gives us insight on a mortal human being going through stuff
Yeah.
and enduring those things, and we see how he endures them. He trusts in the Lord. He feels the Lord isn't with him sometimes. us a great example of our mortal life.
Yes, yes.
And how to deal with it and how to keep our faith and keep our hope. And then we see a wonderful end, to all that if we follow people in the Psalms such as David.
Right, right. Interesting. So, number one, the structure, looking at the Psalms from a purely academic standpoint, not an application standpoint, but from a knowledge standpoint, we could spend an entire quarter just on that side of things without actually looking at any of the individual Psalms. That's not my goal. That's not what we're going to do. So in this class, there may be tidbits or little pieces of the Psalms or things that you're like, oh, hey, did you know this, right? About the Psalms that we probably won't touch on. We're gonna fly through at a very high level. Marla? Yeah. Mm. We sing a song, and it's actually taken not from the book of Psalms, but I think from the book of Luke, if I'm not incorrect in thinking this. If the sky were of parchment made, and every stalk on earth a quill, and the oceans were just full of ink, to write the whole of the love of God above would drain the oceans dry. That's a quote from the Bible, but it's also in one of the songs that we sing, so I'm paraphrasing hurriedly right now. But you get the notion, kind of saying what you're saying, Marla. We don't even have the words. Good point. Anybody else? Okay, I'm going to move on. With regards to the Psalms is one of the most widely and the most used books of the Bible itself. We're going to go over a couple facts here, but y'all remember when I did the thing on Gideon, and there's the Gideon Bibles, right? Gideon Bible puts out a little tiny pocket Bible. What's in that pocket Bible? It's the New Testament, it's Psalms, and it's Proverbs. That's right? Right? So when the Gideons were putting together this smaller Bible, they wanted to include the New Testament, but then they included just 2 books from the Old Testament. And the 2 books they chose were Psalms and Proverbs. And I think we'll go over kind of some of those reasons why here. But here's a recommendation for why read the Psalms. The Psalms is the most read, the most used of all the Old Testament books. In the Psalms, ancient worshipers address God for centuries. People of faith have learned from these texts how to pray. And some of the Psalms, were inspired by who wrote a lot of the Psalms? David. And when you think about David writing the Psalms, where was he writing some of these Psalms from? In a cave. He was being chased by his enemies, and you want to talk about in the pit of despair, or in a place where you're going to be so connected with your God because that's all you have. There's a certain amount of inspiration that comes from that. And you just kind of want to tap into the human potential for when he is inspired and pushed beyond his means on a reliance with God. What's going through your head? Well, the Psalms capture some of that, and it's really intense. Also, the Psalms, they express every emotion from joy to despair, from hate to love. Thus, pilgrims of faith find themselves in the Psalms, and they find themselves praying. There is a psalm for just about every season. In fact, Martin Luther, not Martin Luther King, but Martin Luther, said of the Psalms, "This explains, moreover, why the Psalter is the favorite book of all the saints, and why each one of them, whatever his circumstances may be, finds in it psalms and words which are appropriate to the circumstances in which he finds himself, and meet his needs as adequately as if they were composed exclusively for his sake. Have you ever had, and I know several of you have because you've told me that you have, an occasion where you needed something. You didn't know what it was, but you needed something spiritual. So you turn to your Bible and you just let it fall open. You look down and you say, wow, that's exactly what I needed. And 9 times out of 10, it's going to come from the Psalms. The Psalms just capture exactly what we need when we need it. How many of you have had that happen and know exactly what I'm talking about? Okay, good. I know I'm not alone here. The Psalms have significantly influenced history and theology. What's one of the most well-known Psalms that you can think of off the top of your head? The 23rd Psalm. The Lord is my shepherd, I shall not want. And we see it quoted in movies. We see it in TV shows. We see bumper stickers of it, right? It has influenced man from the time that it was written throughout history. They address the encounter between God and congregation, right? You see congregational offerings or instructions for congregational offerings in the Psalms, as well as the significance of the worship event for the life of faith. We learn how worship happens. C.S. Lewis, in his reflections on the Psalms, said this: "What must be said, however, is that the Psalms are poems, and poems intended to be sung, not doctrinal treatises, nor even sermons." And song, my opinion, is the purest and most direct form of connecting a message as powerfully as we can. When we sing a song, we are putting into our soul a communication level that is far more intense, I think, than just talking about it, right? You ever had that instance where, and I know I'll confess, you've seen it in me, where we'll be singing a song and I get goosebumps. What does that even mean? What does it even mean that I get these goosebumps? There's a physiological thing that's making some kind of connection, and I'll dare say with the spiritual element of what it is that we're doing that we can't really explain. It's really difficult, right? It's not like you take this pill and you will get goosebumps. No, it is you connect with the message and what you're doing in such a way. Your body physiologically reacts to it. Can you explain it? No, not really. Same thing happens to me with food too, and coffee. Well, coffee for a different reason, Alan.
The Bible talks about heartstrings.
Yes.
So, that's connected there. When you look at your child and your heart just goes like that. It's like, what is that? What's going on? And those are those goosebumps.
Absolutely, absolutely. And Psalms make such a connection with that. And sometimes I can't answer questions without referencing some kind of song. Somebody may ask me a question, and I go straight to a song because I don't know of another way of answering it, right? Solomon.
is as bitter as one would.
Right.
In fact, it's not as good as it looks. So I like facts, I like statistics a lot, and I think a lot of men do too. So yes, it's poetry, but it's littered with factual statements.
I'm really glad that you said that, Saul, because you're going to love the next 15, 20 minutes of this class. All right. Other psalms not in the Psalms. Now, Psalms, what does Psalms mean? Song, right? Songs. There are other songs that are not contained in the book of Psalms, like the Song of Moses. In Exodus chapter 15, I will sing to the Lord, for he has triumphed gloriously. The horse and rider he has thrown into the sea. 1 Samuel 2, verses 1 through 10. That is a psalm that Hannah wrote, a song, after she had Samuel. Jonah, he writes a song, and he's sitting in the middle of a fish. You remember that? And then you also have Luke chapter 1, verse 46 through 55. It's often referred to as the Magnificat. Well, what is that? That is Mary's song. That is Mary's song. So many wonderful things. Actually, songs pulled from these ones as well as the book of Psalms. So let's go really quick. Okay, here's the academic part. Don't fall asleep on me, please. Okay, there are structure. There is actual structure given to the book of Psalms. It's broken up into 5 different books. I didn't know that, but it is. You can see here book 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. Psalm 1 through 41 is the first book. And what's really interesting is that with these different books, there are bookends, right? Psalms, in the way that they are structured, are really cool. And if you want to really get deep, you'll talk about parallelism within the Psalms themselves. We won't go too much into that because that's a little bit too cranial for this morning. But look at Psalm 1 and then Psalm 150. And it's really cool because if you put the two right next to each other, you can finish reading Psalm 1 and read Psalm 150, and it's almost like you haven't stopped reading at all. Psalm 1 ends with, "But the way of the wicked will perish. Praise the Lord." And then it's just this huge, it's like this amen statement at the very end, Psalm 150, just praising the Lord. And it's a beautiful psalm. This one is really interesting, though. Look at the next one, Psalm 2, and then Psalm 149. Psalm 2 starts off with, "Why do the nations rage so furiously together? Why the kings of the earth set themselves up, rulers take counsel together against the Lord and against his anointed." And it's asking these questions like, why? And then Psalm 149 ends with this: God is going to execute vengeance on the nations. Why do the nations rage? God's going to execute vengeance on the nations. And punishment on the people, to bind their kings with chains and their nobles with fetters of iron. Isn't that interesting? The way that they just bookend one right after the other. And you can start to see and explore. And if you're really into this kind of stuff, I would encourage you, study the Psalms. And when you study them and you look at them, you can ask yourself a couple questions. When you read the Psalms, if you want an academic approach, you're going to look at the psalm and you're going to say, okay, what is the structure of the psalm? How was the psalm used in worship? How did the community shape the psalm? To what end does the psalm use language? Is it parallelism, repetition, using loaded terms? How does the psalm, loaded terms, look at how many times something is repeated. You know, there is something in the Psalms called an and I'm going to get this wrong, Elohistic Psalter. Elohistic Psalter. Do y'all know what that means? The names of God and how they appear, whether Yahweh is being used or Elohim is being used. There's a whole group of psalms that fall into the Elohim category that you can look at. All right, I can see eyes glazing over, so I'll move on. 4 major types of psalms. Psalms of wisdom, laments, psalms of praise, and royal psalms. So for this class, we're dividing up the psalms into 4 different groups. Actually, we're not, but lighting the way is. We're going to study psalms of wisdom, laments, and psalms of praise. Royal psalms was left out of this, and that's okay. We'll stick with the criteria here, but psalms of wisdom is where we're going to start. This is psalms of instruction. Solomon, you're looking for facts. Here they are. These are psalms that are broken up into really 3 basic categories. Number 1, statement of fact, the fear of Yahweh and the love of the law, and what happens to you when you do those things. Number 2, there are some of these wisdom psalms that provide a contrast between righteous and wicked. It gives you the reader a choice. And the way the book writes it in the high school book is the Psalms describe life in terms of bad guys and good guys. Good guys do what is right. Bad guys do what is wrong, right? Wicked, okay? So there's a contrast between righteous and wicked. And then finally, there are instructions on daily living. This is real, tangible, hang your hat on, yes, if you do this. And again, getting back to the wisdom, seeking wisdom and looking for, you pull out all these books, and these are observations that people have made on if you do this in business, you think above the line, don't think below the line ever. Follow this leadership style or grow coaching or whatever it might be, then you'll be successful. That Psalms have instructions just like what's written in here. And there was a part of me as I was gathering and looking at all these books, I was like, man, have I read the Psalms as much as I've actually read some of these books? Maybe I need to take a step back here because it's all there. So we're going to talk about Psalms, about right and wrong. That's the name of the chapter here, but really what this is, these are instructional wisdom psalms. So for the next 15 minutes, we're going to dive into these 5 psalms, actually these 4 psalms, broken up into 5 different categories, and we're going to look at them. We're going to examine them. I'm going to rely on you and your biblical knowledge to tell me what you have already studied in some of these, because I know you have. Psalm 1. Psalm 1. Go ahead, everybody turn to Psalm 1 if you will. Synopsis of this psalm. What is this psalm talking about? And I've stopped the academic portion. Now it's the classroom participation portion. Oh. What's that? Okay, contrast between the righteous and the wicked. Alan, is that you were going to say the same thing? Okay, right. It sets up really this. Here's the righteous. Here's the wicked. What do the righteous do? And it kind of states it in the negative. It doesn't say, it starts off with the righteous. Well, if you're righteous, you don't do this. What do you not do? Well, no, if you're righteous, you do fear the Lord. Yeah, if you're righteous, sorry, and I know I kind of spun a double negative there. If you're righteous, you don't walk in the path of, or in the counsel of the wicked. You don't stand, right, in the way of sinners. You don't sit in the seat of the scornful. So it's telling you all these things that you don't do if you're righteous. That's a fact. That's not hyperbole. That's not conjecture. It's a fact. If you are righteous, you don't do these things. Instead, what do you do? You delight in the law of the Lord, and in it you meditate day and night. There's a real life practice for you. This is, if you are righteous, this is what you're going to do. And then what's the end result? Blessed. This man who meditates day and night, what does it say about him? He's like a tree planted by the river. Think about the imagery of that, right? If a tree is planted by a river, what does a tree need? Water. If it's by a river, it's not in a desert. It has a constant source of life. So what's the application to us? What's the application to you? Okay, so you will produce fruit, right? If you're looking at this psalm as a self-help book, what are you going to change in your life? You're going to spend more time in the Word. That's right. And then it does a contrast here. It says, the wicked are not so. They will not stand in the judgment, right? They are like chaff that the wind drives away. And so really, this psalm is doing two things, right? Remember when we looked at our previous here, 3 categories? We can see a contrast between the righteous and the wicked, and we can see fear of particularly the law, a reverence for the law, so much so that it is something that you need to be about. How often? How righteous do you want to be? Day and night. If you're going to be like that tree that's by those waters, right? What's the water? The Word. Right? So if you're not giving yourself that Word, you're not by that river. Psalm 37, verses 1 through 11. Now, remember I highlighted what you want to do is you want to look for those key phrases. You want to look for things that repeat over and over and over again. Look at Psalm 37. It's really interesting. As I was reading through the psalm, I saw this phrase over and over and over again. And my Bible, my version says, fret not yourself. In fact, that's how the book begins. Fret not yourself. What's another way of saying fret not yourself? What's that? Yeah, worry. Fear not. Don't worry. Fret not yourself. And I thought that's interesting because you see it in verse 1, verse 7, and verse 8. Now, if you want to talk about instruction, if you want to talk about facts for righteous living, this is where you're going to go. What does it say? Verse 3. What are you going to do? You're going to trust in the Lord and do good. I remember when what was it? I think it was the real life version of Cinderella came out, and it had Lady Rose from Downton Abbey in it playing as Cinderella. And of course, you know, it opens up with that scene of her mother dying, and her mother gives her some advice that she carries with her her whole life. If you've seen that movie, do you know what I'm talking about? The advice that she gives? She tells her, be kind. And it's like the most powerful moment in that movie because it's like with this dying breath, she says, be kind. And then Cinderella wraps her entire life around that phrase of be kind. Well, it's fun for Hollywood, but we have real examples. And I'm not saying be kind is bad advice at all. quite good, actually. But here we see trust in the Lord and do good. What are you going to do? I'm going to do good, right? Bad guys do what is bad, and good guys do what is good. It's as simple as that, right? Instructions on righteous living. Verse 4, delight yourself in the Lord. What does that mean? Can you give me a practical, this is delighting in the Lord, this is not delighting in the Lord scenario? What does that even mean? It means it's fun to come to worship. Yes, I would agree with that. Absolutely, 100%. What else? Yes, yes, you desire his teachings. And it's funny because, I don't know, tell me if you've had this experience. Maybe you haven't. I know I have. You walk into the self-help section in a Barnes & Noble, and you see all these books, and you're like, oh, I wish I had all this knowledge right here. I want it in my head, and I'm going to get, and I'm going to buy, and I'm going to read, and right? That's happened to me. I don't know if it's happened to you, but it's definitely happened to me, where I'm like, I need this information. You see where I'm going? Right? Okay? Yes, sir.
I know we're short on time, but delight yourself in the Lord. I see it kind of like flipped around. If you're in the Lord, you're going to find delight. It's going to be delightful.
Yes.
So delight yourself in the Lord. Maybe it means the same thing, but if you're in the Lord, it's enjoyable. It's wonderful. It's delightful.
Goosebumps.
Yeah.
Yes, sir. Commit your way to the Lord, right? These books are going to tell you if you operate your business this way, if you operate your finances in this way, Robert Kiyosaki will tell you never go into debt, right? So if you do that, then you will live, right? Commit yourself to the Lord. Commit yourself to his teaching. That's the message here. Be still before the Lord and wait patiently for him. How many of us can use that lesson? Me? For sure. Especially in today's instant gratification, Amazon Prime, next day, same day, drone delivery, all that stuff. I mean, it keeps getting more and more. Refrain from anger and forsake wrath. There's a message for all of us here. Perhaps you're really good at one of these, but not the others. Perhaps you need all of these, like, I'm sure I do. Look at these, and we've got 4 minutes. Okay. Continuing on in 37, the steps of man are established when he delights. I often think about it from this perspective. My generation, I don't know what generations are doing nowadays, what kids are doing, but my generation, it was like a really big thing to like go find yourself, right? Do you remember that? Remember hearing about that? Like, I'm going to take a 1-year sabbatical and I'm going to go find myself. Why do you need to find yourself? Because okay, it's not new with me. Great. I don't know if they're still doing it today or not, right? The whole idea behind that was, I don't know who I am. I don't know what I'm about. I need to spend a year in silence, and I need to find myself. If you had looked and you had read Psalm 37, it would have been a lot quicker and maybe even cheaper, because you would have been able to find it that quick. I know, O Lord, that the way of man is not in himself. It is not man who walks to direct his own steps. Jeremiah. Right? If you delight in the Lord, there you go. And here's a really easy one. And this one, it's so funny because it's so simple, but it's so profound. Right? Turn away from evil and do good. How hard is that? Man has struggled with that from the beginning of time. It's that simple.
And sometimes it's as simple as just being a result. The do good comes as a result from turning away from the evil.
Yes, yes.
And we can think of things, if we're honest with ourselves, we can think of some things that are evil in our lives. And if we start turning away from them, all of a sudden we're just doing good. We're feeling closer to God.
Yes, yes, yes. Wait for the Lord and keep his way. 112, a beatitude. Blessed is the man who fears the Lord, who greatly delights in his commandments. And then if you turn to Psalm 112, it's interesting because the entire psalm revolves around this idea of fearing the Lord and delighting in his commandments. His offspring will be mighty in the land. Wealth and riches are in his house. Light dawns in the darkness for the upright. Wow. Take a step back and just 30 seconds meditate on light dawns in darkness for the upright. Beloved, we live in dark times. Where are we going to get our light? Right? It is well with the man who generously lends. The righteous will never be moved. Here's one for today's times, timeless. He is not afraid of bad news. That's the bell. We didn't get to finish it. Good place to end. Thank you, thank you, thank you.